Joseph Brant, Iroquois Leader in the Revolution, by Stephanie Cohen, illustrated by Carol Hayer. Page 3. The Celebrity. It was the summer of 1776. While the American colonies were declaring their independence, Joseph Brant, a young Mohawk Indian, toured Great Britain in high style. He feasted with lords and ladies and visited England's famous sights. London Magazine featured him in a lead story, and a famous artist painted his portrait. People treated him as a celebrity. He even had a meeting with King George III. Page 4. It was rare for anyone to get this kind of treatment from the British. It was doubly rare for an Indian. But Joseph Brant felt at home sipping tea from delicate china cups and conversing with lords and ladies. Familiar with the English language and customs, he expressed himself easily and with a sense of humor. There was a plan behind the lavish welcome. Britain hoped that Brant, an important Iroquois leader, would lead his people into war on the British side in the American Revolution. He knew and admired the British, and he wanted to help them in the war. Yet the greatest question in Joseph Brant's mind was how to save his own people. Page 5. Joseph Brant's early years. Joseph Brant was born in the Ohio Valley in 1742 during the fall deer hunting season. His Mohawk name was Thayendanegea, meaning he places two bets. His name proved ironic because Joseph would wager everything on one side, the British, during the American Revolution. Joseph's father was a leader among the Iroquois people. Later, Joseph would take his father's title and also become a leader for the Iroquois nation. Growing up, Joseph Brant watched his father closely and learned at first-hand important lessons in leadership. Like his father, Joseph built strong friendships with representatives of the British government. Both father and son believed that British power offered the Iroquois people their best hope for the future. Joseph Brant learned other lessons from his father about the Iroquois past. The Iroquois had lived for centuries in what is now New York State. The Iroquois League, also known as the Six Nations, included 6 separate tribes: the Cayuga, the Oneida, the Seneca, the Onondaga, Tuscarora, and Joseph Brant's own group, the Mohawks. In Brant's time, the members of the Six Nations were often wealthier than the settlers. They raised crops, hunted, and lived in comfortable homes. Integrated into American town life, they worked alongside the settlers as tailors, whalers, gun-stockers, and carpenters. Page 6. On its own, each group was powerful. Together, though, they were an even mightier force. When Joseph was young, the Iroquois was one of the most powerful Indian nations in North America. When the British and the French planted their colonies on American soil, they soon learned to fear the matchless Iroquois warriors. Joseph Brant's education took an unusual turn in 1762. His sister had married Sir William Johnson, the British superintendent of the Northern Indians of America. Brant soon became a favorite of Johnson, and Johnson chose him, along with a few other Mohawks, to attend Moore's charity school for Indians in Lebanon, Connecticut. This school would one day be moved to New Hampshire and become Dartmouth College. Page 7. At Johnson's school, Brant studied English, the arts and sciences, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Brant loved school and learning. He also became a devout Christian during his time in school. He planned to use his skills and persuasive personality to become a missionary. His formal education in Connecticut sealed his ties to the British. For years afterwards, he remained close to friends from the school and to the school's headmaster. When he finished school, Brant fought in the French and Indian War, serving for 4 years under his brother-in-law, Sir William Johnson. When the war ended, Brant became Johnson's right-hand man, helping to run the British-led Indian Department from its headquarters in Quebec, Canada. Joseph Brant married Margaret in 1768, the daughter of an Oneida chief. It was then that he formally joined the Church of England. Joseph and Margaret had a son and a daughter, but were married only 3 years before Margaret died of tuberculosis. Joseph's schooling in Connecticut had given him a new perspective on the thriving colony. By the 1760s, colonies like Connecticut and Massachusetts were growing rapidly. People from these and other colonies were filtering west into Iroquois country, looking for more land. Page 9. Brant leads the Iroquois nation. Every year, the new settlements expanded. Small clusters of isolated farms, carved into the fertile lands of central New York, attracted other settlers. Soon, the clusters of farms became villages. With every new farm and town, the Iroquois lost more of their traditional hunting grounds in the region's forest. Some British representatives spoke to the Iroquois about signing a treaty that might help them. The British proposed a border that would protect Iroquois lands to the west if they would give up lands to the south. But the agreement didn't seem to help. With every year, new settlers arrived, and with every new farm, Indian fears about the future grew. So too did their anger. Joseph Brant did not understand how little control the British had over the colonies and the restless settlers. He and other Iroquois were surprised when the American independence movement burst into open warfare. Yet Brant was also quick to see that the revolution offered the Iroquois hope. If Brant and the Iroquois could help Britain defeat the American rebels, perhaps the British would look more kindly on the Iroquois nation. Then, perhaps, they would use their power to protect the Iroquois. So Brant struggled to unify the Iroquois nation behind King George's armies. Brant knew that the strength of the Iroquois was greatest when they stood together. Page 10. During one speech he made to the Council of the Six Nations, in the presence of an American general and colonel, Brant said, "We are of the same opinion with the people of the United States. You consider yourselves as independent people. We, as the original inhabitants of this country, and sovereigners of the soil, look upon ourselves as equally independent and free as any other nation or nations. This country was given to us by the Great Spirit above. We wish to enjoy it and have our passage along the lake, within the line we have pointed out." Joseph Brant succeeded in bringing 4 of the Iroquois tribes under his leadership. The Oneida and Tuscarora remained on the side of the settlers throughout the American Revolution. Page 11. Brant was in Great Britain when the Americans signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. It was on this trip that he spoke to King George III. He reminded the king about the loyalty the Iroquois had shown Britain in the French and Indian War, and he complained bitterly that the British had done so little to protect Iroquois lands. "We have let the king's subjects have so much of our lands for so little value," he said. "Why should they cheat us of the small spots we have left for our women and children to live on?" The king solemnly promised Brant that when the fighting was over, Britain would take care of the Iroquois. Secure in this knowledge, and trusting the king completely, Brant returned to New York. And returning home, he turned his mind from diplomacy to war. Brant and his soldiers fought a bloody campaign in the lands that had been their traditional homes. In the Mohawk Valley of New York, they attacked settlements and fought. Page 12. They fought the Battle of Oriskany, where Brant's attackers killed more than 200 settlers and defenders, taking a few captives as well. Brant's reputation as a warrior grew. He crushed the fortified settlement at Cherry Valley, New York, and carried the war into Pennsylvania. These battles and others took a terrible toll. The bitterness of the fighting fueled hatred and fear throughout the towns and cities of the Northeast. Many remembered the long tradition of the terrifying Iroquois warrior. George Washington feared Brant so much that he plotted to have Brant kidnapped. Page 13. The Iroquois and the End of the War. In the end, all Brant's efforts could not hold back the tide of American victories. As the independence movement gained strength, more Iroquois began to switch sides and cast their lot with the Americans. Brant watched helplessly as the British began to falter in the war. Broken-hearted, he saw the Iroquois nation fall into disunion and crumble. The end of the war created a new border between Canada and the United States. This border cut right through the middle of Iroquois country. In the years after the war, Joseph Brant met with George Washington, hoping to find peace and security for the Iroquois. But his people's troubles were far from over. Page 14. Looking for safety, he settled with a group of Mohawks in Ontario on 765,000 acres that he had been given for his tribe. Today, the town that he settled bears his name, Brantford. Joseph Brant married again. His wife's name was Catherine Croghan, the daughter of an Irish father and a Mohawk mother. This marriage would last until Joseph's death. They had 7 children, who were all given a good education. His sons attended Dartmouth College. Page 15. In Canada, Brant never gave up his wish to unite and defend his people. But at the same time, he encouraged them to adapt many European ways. He especially wanted his people to embrace Christianity. To help them, he translated parts of the Bible into Mohawk, one of the Iroquois languages. In his old age, Joseph Brant could look back on a life that had seen enormous change. As a boy, he lived and hunted in untamed wilderness. Then he watched as farms were claimed from the same wilderness. He saw wars between the French and the British, then between the British and their own American colonies. He visited with both kings and generals. The end.